I first want to thank you all for the incredible work that you do every day across the sectors, across the disciplines, at every level of government, working to better identify, communicate, and ultimately reduce the risks and costs of flood disasters. It makes a difference, and it matters every single day. As Larry noted, I've been a floodplain management practitioner and working with ASFPM in various capacities for the better part of a 20-year career. And so I know what it is to work at the local government level and sit across the table from families and businesses and from developers that want to bring you jobs and bring you tax base, and the idea being to try to steer that in a good place in your community so that it can be resilient and can be there to perform for your community over generations. I also know what it is, though, to get some pushback there. But lastly, I know what it is after a flood disaster to have some of those same folks that are pushing on you come back and thank you for making those tough decisions and making sure that their single largest investment, their home, or the business that they want to bring stayed high and dry in the flood. And so having sat in your shoes, it's been a real honor to be able to bring that lens to the work with the White House. We also recognize, certainly in Washington and in the administration, that's not really where the action is. We don't get it done at the White House. We don't get it done inside the Beltway. You guys get it done. And that's why the president also recognized this and stood up the state, local, and tribal leaders task force on climate preparedness and resilience to advise us on what local governments most need from the federal government to prepare for the impacts of climate change and extreme weather. That task force has come in with an incredible body of knowledge and recommendations that come from 26 governors, mayors, county officials, and tribal leaders from across the nation that represent a diversity of impacts, ideologies, points of view. This is not just urban. We've got small towns represented as well. We've got regional players represented as well. And they came in and they told us, I think, three big things. They told us about 500 things, but we've gelled it down to more than 100 recommendations and several, just over a dozen priority actions that we are going to be acting on in this administration. But I put those in three big categories. First and foremost, we are hearing that you need data, you need information, you need robust maps. We're responding to that in so many ways, including through the 3DEP project that the president announced with USGS and other federal partners, working also with the private sector and academia. He also made a bold request for $400 million in mapping for the NFIP, for the FY16 budget. We recognize that data and information are needed, and I'm going to come back to that in a bit. We also heard loud and clear that communities most need technical assistance to go through the full range of options and impacts and opportunities, going through the full range of federal programs and tools, the different data sets that are available. How do we parse through all that and select strategies that are tailored for a local government or a state or a region? And so that's where that technical assistance is absolutely critical. I really want to point to, I think, one of the great examples of that through the Army Corps-led Silver Jackets program. That has been such a successful program in rallying the talent and the expertise across the federal government and delivering that support at the state level. It's operating across the nation, and that is the type of tailored assistance that we're hearing state and local governments most need. The idea, though, is how can we get that into communities in advance of a flood disaster at that local community level? So we're looking at ways to do that through the Corporation for Community Service and AmeriCorps and other resources that can be brought to bear right there at the local community level. And then looking across the full range of federal programs to see where we can be tapping and making stronger those technical assistance services to support your work. And the other, I think, big category that we heard is the need for local governments to be better incentivized, to make those tough choices, to reserve more of those floodplains as open space, letting these floodplains do what they do best, which is to flood. And incentives to be investing on the front end in mitigation. So that is resonating loud and clear. The last thing that I think is very important too, that we heard from local governments, is the need for federal leadership. And sometimes what that looks like is getting out of the way. And as the President advised the Sandy Task Force that was led by then HUD Secretary Sean Donovan, who's now the OMB Director, he said, the President said, no Bigfoot on Sandy recovery. What that means, I think, is this is not about the federal government coming in with a big policy footprint that's going to be directing things from the top down. This is about that shared responsibility approach. This is about leveraging the views and the perspectives and the skills at every level of government. And so I think that's where the real recognition across the board is, where state and local governments are leading the way, as they should, as the laboratories for policy that we were taught in law school. Sometimes the best thing the federal government can do is to get out of the way. And so that federal leadership takes many forms. But we also do, as a federal government, need to be leading by example. And that's why the President included in his climate action plan, why the Sandy Task Force included in their recommendations, and the State Local Tribal Leaders Task Force called for a federal flood risk management standard that we heard about from the federal panel just before this one. So I really want to thank you all for taking the time to read through what's being proposed, weigh in with your thoughtful comments. As I wrap up, I will say there are a couple of things coming for you there. We have put out the broad interagency guidelines and are hearing from you on refinements of that and the best path forward. But what's coming next is each individual agency will be going through their specific authorities and putting out their agency-specific actions and procedures and rules. So please be prepared, stand ready to weigh in again, and help us get it right as we refine this going forward. Thank you all so much.